And there we are, live again. You're welcome back to the latest episode of Molby on the Spot for Anfield Index and Anfield Index Pro. This is, of course, Mr. Jan Molby with us, as per usual, as we look back on what has been a bit of a trying time in recent days and even weeks, if we're being honest, for the Reds, and look ahead to what we can expect. There are some very bright patches on the horizon, however, and of course, one major one. Good evening, Jan.
Yes, good evening, Trevor. It has indeed been trying, but it had also gone so smooth prior to that, hadn't it? So there's always a spell, isn't it? And if you're gonna have a spell, have it when you're 12 points clear.
It feels a lot, doesn't it? Like some people are leaning into the negativity when you have, as you say, a gap like that, and yet it was shrunk a little bit by a very bad result. Maybe even the result isn't so bad. The performance was appalling, which I think is what stuck in the craw. You can understand, I think, to a certain extent, if you look at it objectively, it's 3 defeats in the last 4 games. And two of those defeats are very consequential in terms of a cup final and exiting, the premier competition in football. And then to go back into the league where we're supposed to be having nothing else to think about now except that. We were hearing all the positive news and all the positive lines coming from people about having their head in the game and all the rest of it. It was hard to comprehend what exactly we were looking at, wasn't it, at the weekend there, Jan? We're looking at, it's going to be 8 Sundays in a row. I really struggled with what I was seeing on the pitch and trying to make any sense out of it. I think the tiredness thing is difficult to argue too much for. We are in a situation now where lads have a week off between each of these games, so the performances are going to have a serious uptick. Did you have any theory on why it was quite so appalling? And it was appalling.
We briefly touched it on the other week, Trevor, that this might just be our dodgy spell during the season, and there is no warnings. There was no warning. It sort of started PSG away, Southampton at home in the Premier League. Where we couldn't raise a gallop as a sort of an old-fashioned saying, isn't it? And ever since then, we just haven't been able to sort of, get our identity back into the way that we play. I think we've all been there, Trevor. As I said before, there's no warning. It's bizarre the way that it happens to a whole group of players, not just 1 or 2, but possibly 15, 20 players. And you can even have players who've hardly played this season who will also be affected by this sort of tiredness, unsharpness. I saw 1 or 2 people being a little bit uncomplimentary. I mean, I was a big fan of Paul Scholes as a player, and I actually think he's pretty straightforward as a pundit. And I was surprised that he felt the need to mention the word arrogant. There was a little arrogance about Liverpool. I just don't see that. I mean, it was probably the first game this season, the Fulham one we're talking about, where prior to the game, I felt there'd been a change in the way that the fans view the season, in that they were now talking about when. Whereas prior to that, we were talking about if and can we do it. And now we're sort of talking about when it's going to happen. And I just felt that maybe the pressure's off a little bit. Is that a good or bad thing? I don't know. But the bottom line is, Trevor, that we don't need many more points. And we got some very winnable games coming up, isn't it? So, as they say, Trevor, we go again, innit? We go again. But I have to say that, when you're in a spell like this as a player, we often talk about, I want to play every other day, because we're in great form. But when you're in a spell like this, you kind of don't look forward to the games either, because you're looking for something, you're looking for a trigger, whatever that trigger might be. It might come in training, it might come in the first minute of any game. So it is all these. It was never meant to be easy, was it? Playing elite sport, whatever that sport is, it was never meant to be easy. It's difficult, it's challenging. Some things are unexplainable, and I just think for the group that we've got and the way that we played basically all season, we are a little unrecognisable at the moment.
Yeah, and people can spin around looking for reasons for that. And of course, yeah, you're right. The arrogant one was thrown around a lot, and there's you can kind of almost justify the Scholes take when you see an apparent lack of inability to exert yourself in a game where there are such high stakes, and that's one way you could interpret it. But like we've said a million times, it's not as if these guys had character changes overnight and suddenly don't want the league. But psychologically, who knows what sort of pressures that have been on that squad and on that group recently. It was just a little bit unsettling. And when you say we've got winnable games ahead, I was listening to Dave's show today on the channel, and he said something very similar. And he was talking about the amount of Liverpool fans who are kind of wetting themselves, honestly, with anxiety about what's happening or could happen. And it's not much consolation, is it, that these are teams who are, doing very badly, because people have this muscle memory of Liverpool maybe not showing up against some of these kind of teams that are in the lower echelons of the league and making really hard work of it. So I think that's probably a combination of that. It's probably gotten into the players' heads as well. But one thing I can't understand, and this is what I'd love maybe if we could just pull apart a little bit from the Fulham game, is to see the real fall off that has happened with Virgil over the last couple of weeks, in terms of a couple of performances now where, people who are clever with video editing could have him on toast for the rest of the season and into next campaign, talking about, this is the great Virgil van Dijk, is he doing air kicks and stuff like that. Mo Salah, who is having an outrageous season, but has a good few games in a row now where we haven't seen any of that end product that the team has been so absolutely focused on. I think if you look at something like the final, you could say, well, he was starved at the ball. But maybe not so much in the most recent game against Fulham. So when you see that, when you see the really, really impressive footballers really struggling, is that something that can take hold as well? Are people looking to those guys to save the day every day? Can a team, even a team full of good footballers, and God knows you were part of loads of squads there at Anfield that were wonderful, packed to the gills with good footballers, but even those teams have their sort of talismanic figures, and if they're not doing it, can that seep in a little bit, do you think, into a group?
Yeah, of course it can. You do always look towards your leaders. I mean, the greatest moment you have is that when you don't need to look towards your leaders because everything is just going really well and you get on with it. Now, in terms of the two players you mentioned, I think Mo is easier to explain than possibly Virgil. Also because you look at Mo, and I still think Mo is a moment player. He has moments in games. Mo, you'll never come away from Anfield and going, did you see the way that Mo controlled the game today? Because that's not your job, is it? Did you see the way that Mo made us play? We played really, really well. And also, arguably for what he's already put in, there was also a lot of rumours about what he put in the close season to make sure he was absolutely spot on for this season. He's put it all in. Virgil's a little bit more difficult because of the position that he plays in. So a lot of the things he does is not on the same knife edge as it is with Mo, and also he has this sort of, he's almost faultless, isn't he, Trev? And that's why I'm finding it a little. So Mo's a goal scorer. He misses a chance. It's part of what you do, isn't it? And people say, well, as a defender, part of what you do is making mistakes, but it's not really if you're Virgil van Dijk, is it? So I'm a little bit baffled as why it's had him in that way over the last few weeks. Again, I wouldn't be worried beyond and extending his contract, and I think he's going to be absolutely fine, isn't it? But maybe he's just, I don't know, but it's almost like a subconscious thing where it's done now, and sometimes we always used to say, Trevor, it was a very sort of start quick and you can always go quicker. start slow, and it can be very difficult to get the pace of the game. So maybe that's what it is. We just don't get off on the right foot. I know we took the lead at Fulham, isn't it? But it never looked like it was going to last. We just weren't in the game where we were. It was a match filled with uncharacteristic mistakes, really.
The way the narrative of the match played out, I found it very interesting because people were doing a lot of lazy reporting, the usual stuff you get from pundits afterwards, and people were saying that Liverpool were great in the first 15 minutes, but then blah blah blah. Right now, I think McAllister scores in 13, and that's a worldie. But on 4 or 5 minutes, we have that incident where they were looking for a penalty against Virgil, where it's a coming together, and it's never a penalty. But Caoimhín Kelleher takes their player out of it. I think it's Pereira. It's a penalty. That was a penalty. And we had Ibu Konate running around like he was Bambi on ice as well. It was a bit of a kind of comedy of errors, right from the start of the match. So this thing you were saying about, I think it's just so right. If you don't set your own tempo, if you don't start the way you're hoping to continue or even move up from that, it can be very difficult to get back into it. And we've had this trend, haven't we, of Arne Slot's second half reds. For a lot of this season, games have been very unimpressive in the first half, and we've come to expect that the turnaround will come in the second half. And look, there were some efforts in that second half, but you're never going to really be able to make up for a bit like Real Madrid last night against Arsenal. It was just too much concession. If you have a 14 or 15-minute period like we had, where you're going out of your way to present a team with chances, like what the Andy Robertson one. There's 3 separate efforts by him to make sure that lad scores. It's just really, it's hard to get your head around that level of what appears to be sloppiness. Yeah, and I suppose this is what, again, as in your position as an ex-player, I know the 85-86 title charge was not. There wasn't a big gap. If I recall, actually, he wasn't looking great at Christmas. No. But the 87-88 one, where all the new players were part of the team, was a little bit more in that way that they are today. Is that a thing that can happen? That the gap opens up, and when people are saying it's a matter of when and not if, is that something that can get to you, that you just maybe Scholes is right? Maybe there is like a subconscious arrogance, like we have this in the bag now. We just need to go through the motions, but there's more to it than that when you're playing a very, very, very effective team like Fulham.
Yeah, but what you just mentioned and the way you described it definitely exists in the game. There's absolutely no doubt about that. You kind of know, Trevor, when you're at it. So on Sunday, I'm at the Manchester derby, and you look at the two teams before the game and they do the huddle, and they're going through the motions, aren't they? Yeah. Manchester United are doing a huddle. They're trying to talk themselves up. This is a derby, we're playing against Manchester City. But you look at the players thinking, yeah, but it's been a shit season and they can't be bothered. And I'm looking at Manchester City and they're trying to wind themselves up. This is a Manchester derby, and they go, yeah, but we can't be bothered either because we're 5th or 6th. There's no jeopardy, is it? It's not really happening, is it? And I guess to a certain extent, that's what's happened to our season, isn't it? There isn't one result that will change the outcome of us winning the title, isn't it? So possibly we are just maybe just missing this. Make sure you're ready. We can't afford to drop points here today, you know what I mean? So yeah, maybe so.
Just one last thing on the Fulham thing, so we can sort of stop focusing on the negative, because I'm sure people are fairly spun out, and at this stage, one of our commenters there in the chats, Graham, says, "Do you think Endo's being utilised enough?" He says he's mystified by how few minutes that he gets, and I think it's a fair point. And I just wanted to use that as a sort of segue into a broader thing about how Slot is managing the squad. He seems to, we clearly can see that he has his team. He seems to have 4 lads who he trusts in midfield and no more. And one of them is being used as a right back. I had the feeling after the match, I have to say, and not for the first time in recent games, that maybe the manager was seriously overthinking it, in the way that he approached that match. A kind of square pegs and round holes approach. I can see a theory for why you would use someone who's a good ball retainer, someone who's comfortable on the ball at right back in a certain system to try and give you something approaching what Trent might give you. But painfully, obviously, if you're having a game where both Virgil and Ibu Kanate are struggling, you would like to think that maybe sooner rather than later, the likes of an Endo to screen in front of them will be introduced. But that doesn't seem to be a thing. And the story was breaking via Ornstein start of the week, I think, or towards the end of last week, about how midfield is not necessarily a priority. I think an awful lot of us are pulling whatever remains of our hair out at the thoughts of that, because if you can't see that Liverpool could really do with a bit of an enforcer and a defensive screener there, I don't know what to say to you. What do you think about the way he's managing his squad? You can almost predict that the forwards are going to get shuffled up on 60 and 70, and is it enough? Is he looking? Are we actually starting to see some of the shortcomings of the squad? Maybe can we let the manager off the hook in that regard, that maybe he just doesn't feel like he has enough quality and it is going to be a big summer? What do you make of the squad management and the rotation of the players?
I think it's never been as easy as this, Trevor. I always found it fascinating with Klopp, and the way he would talk all players up, and some players would hardly ever play, and they'd come in and then he'd talk them up as being the best players in the world. This guy doesn't do that. It's pretty clear that there is players in this squad that he doesn't trust. And I'm not a big fan of jumping on Arne Slot's back and going, why is Endo not playing it more? Because I need to know what he wants from his number 6. And I get a feeling what he wants from his number 6 because of what Ryan Gravenberch has given us for the majority of the season. And Endo is not capable of doing what Ryan Gravenberch does. He is capable, however, of doing a different job. And maybe a different job. We spoke about it last week, Trevor. We spoke about, should he have played Endo in the cup final? Were we more looking for that type of a player against them? And just coming on to Curtis, and you talked about, and Kenny Dalglish said the same to me when I made my debut at right back against Aston Villa, and I'm going, what do you mean right back? And he's gone, don't worry about it. He said, you'll be in possession all the time. You'll be able to do all your stuff and whatever. But you're not, Trevor, because it's a defensive position. But I feel that fullbacks is all about positional play. Positional play is so important. That's why I thought we'll get away with it against Everton. But to play as a fullback in an away game, I was not a big fan of that decision. And I have to be honest, and you will probably tell me the same thing, Trevor. I think we all thought this is an accident waiting to happen, isn't it? Curtis playing as a right back with the ball, not a problem, but there's a lot of work without the ball, isn't it? And he just didn't get that right. And in terms of Endo, yeah, it's a shame. But I think you're right with the midfield is not a priority, because that's kind of what we're hearing, isn't it? We're talking about possibly 1-2 fullbacks, maybe another centre half. There's going to be some upheavals up front, whether we like it or not, is there? So, yeah, midfield might not be a priority. And as it stands, he only trusts 4 of them. The 3 that play every week, and then Curtis, who changes every now and again with Shoppers Life. So interesting. It is very, very interesting. But surely, Arne Slot is a bright man. He will learn, and he might look back at some of the things this season and go, we could have done that. We couldn't have done that different. It's almost like embrace every opportunity you have to rest players. It's not as important where you think, let's keep them in the rhythm, let's keep them at them. Let's save their legs every now and again.
Yeah, I mean, it's pointless going over it too much, because you and I have spoken about this specific topic before, and it is different now. But the history of Liverpool chasing, eagerly chasing, publicly chasing defensive midfielders in successive summers with big price tags attached to them, it's there for everyone to see. It feels a little bit like someone's trying to make you feel like you're crazy when you point that out. And this smug thing of, well, the midfield has been sorted because Ryan Gravenberch, it makes no sense. I mean, he's a super footballer, and they can do a really interesting job when they're shuffling between positions. But every squad should have someone like an Endo who's trusted, I guess, is my point. And Endo ain't, for whatever reason.